Mornings are better with Pacific Mornings, 5:31 pi.
Yeah, Jamie, we have some feel-good music for your Wednesday morning. It's 28 minutes past 7 o'clock on this beautiful Wednesday. We've hit the 28th of February 2024, my friends. Now, of course, we want an analysis on the latest political news. And, of course, we always bring PMN and News Chief of News, Justin Latif, when we want to do so. So Justin joins us live this morning to discuss the key political news and issues of the day. Over there we say, Bula Justin, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Bula Vanaka, malolale. How are you doing, Levi?
All good, man. All has been well so far. Another day, another political wrap-up.
Yeah. The listeners obviously can't see this, but Levi has a beautiful view
it's
of
nice,
Manukau, and the sun is rising over the some hotel over there, so it's nice to be up here.
Yeah, no, I do mention often, you come to the studio, it's dark. By the time you leave, it's bright as. So I love it this morning, man. But I appreciate you for jumping onto the show this morning. Now, we haven't caught up with you since we interviewed the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, last week. And he was pretty emphatic that the National Party wouldn't support Te Ana Tuiono's bill for the Western Samoans who lost their New Zealand citizenship under the 1982 Citizenship Western Samoa Act. Now, that bill might not even get past its first reading unless New Zealand First supports it along with the Labour Party and Te Pāti Māori. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how Parliament works. You've got to get enough votes to progress these things. And I guess both Labour and New Zealand First have traditionally not supported this bill. I think we had Christian Malietoa Brown, though, earlier this month, and he talked about how there probably needs to be some amendments in the bill, and if it can go to the select committee stage, that would be a really great place to add those amendments in. So really hoping Labour can, see the value in voting for this along with New Zealand First, and then hopefully maybe a few national voters, MPs. But it's a tricky one because obviously politically Pacific communities do not hold a lot of power in this parliament, and so that goes back to voter turnout and voter engagement back at the last election. And so we might want certain laws changed and things like that, but it always comes back to, well, did we turn up during the general election and make our voices heard? And if we did, then we get policies and laws that we want. And
that's right.
We've currently got the ACT Party trying to push through laws to change our gun laws, and so they're going to allow military-style weapons to become easier to get access for, which So how does that happen? Or it happens because people supported the ACT Party.
That's right.
And so if we want laws to change for Pacific communities, it goes back to general elections, voting, that sort of thing. And that's probably a harsh way to answer your question, but that really is what it goes back to.
Yes, the reality, right?
Yep.
So if we're thinking realistically, it might be hard to have a realistic prediction about how far this will get, but understanding how it all works there, Justin, is it realistic to think that this can even pass the first bill, realistically, in what we've got in terms of a government now?
Look, I think it probably hinges on New Zealand First. I haven't looked at all the numbers, but it's looking pretty unlikely. But there is possibly a chance, I guess, if you had Labour, New Zealand First, Māori Party, Greens all support this as a bloc, then I do believe it would pass, but that would require those parties to really change positions that they've probably held against this bill in the past. I mean, this is not a new issue. As Tone said when he came on the show, it was first raised in the early 2000s, and it was the New Zealand First Labour government that pushed it back at that time. So, it's probably going to be one of those bills that will eventually pass in the future when there's no political risk to the parties to pass it, and for them the risk is seen to be being soft on immigration, unfortunately. And that is really unfortunate part of our politics, is that immigration is a political football for politicians, and they're quite happy to push things down the road if it's going to hurt them at the polls.
Yeah, it was always a long shot looking into it, right? It took a biscuit tin for this thing to come up anyway. So,
but I think the conversation is really important,
Yeah.
and that's something we really should highlight, that laws get brought up, and the fact that it's been pulled out of the biscuit tin and been debated, it's a good chance for us to look at this law, to get it into the media's attention, get it into the public's attention, and then it'll build momentum. Maybe not this time round, but really hopeful that the energy that's been built around it through this process will lead to further action down the track. So nothing's lost. There's no wasted energy when we raise these sort of issues. Even if it doesn't pass, it does lead to something, and you always see that in political history. What doesn't pass now will certainly become a talking point into the future.
Gotcha, yeah. You sort of make it a hot topic now, and then it's
Yep.
in the front of people's minds, right, than
Yeah.
it was before. Was there anything else from that Prime Minister interview, or mentioned in the interview that we had last week, that grabbed your attention?
Look, he started off by saying he's going to be a straight talker. He doesn't want to, muck around New Zealanders, and he wants to give people the honest truth. Now, what I found interesting about that is that when we challenged him, or certainly not challenged, it was quite a nice question around, well, what are you going to do about cost of living, inflation, given you're also trying to get more people into work, get more people back working who maybe have been long-term beneficiaries, which, in principle sounds like a good thing. He didn't really answer the question, and he couldn't answer. The fact is, for inflation to come down, economists are saying we need to raise unemployment, because there's currently too many people with money to buy lots of things, which keeps inflation high. And so he's on one hand pushing through policies that will raise unemployment, like making the Reserve Bank no longer make employment a focus. So they've taken that out of the Reserve Bank's focuses, and they're purely focused on inflation. And so they are going to be raising rates or keeping rates high, which will drive people out of work because they won't be able to pay their bills. And companies will have to make cuts because interest rates are remaining high. On the same time, he's saying, I really want people to get back into work. I want to push people out off the benefit. And so he's not been straight, in my opinion, with New Zealanders, because on one hand, he's essentially wanting unemployment to rise through the changes that his government is pushing through around the Reserve Bank. On the other hand, he's saying, we want people to get off the benefit into jobs. The two things don't work together.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, it's a interesting one. He's not been quite straight with us, and that he's a politician. But it's just interesting that he frames his approach as being a straight talker, yet when we get down to it, he's not able to actually articulate really clearly and honestly with people that actually his economic policies are around raising unemployment.
Yeah, and one of the things that I asked him was around the, obviously a lot of it, for example, when he talked about his State of the Nation speech, and he talked about tough love and that, when he talks about the beneficiaries and all that sort of stuff, was, well, generally a lot of our Pacific Māori are on that, right? They're sort of high on the stats, and it sort of looks as if you're sort of aiming for those communities, you know what I mean, and asking him what they would look like. Obviously, he'd say that that's not what he's trying to do, and the biggest thing that they're trying to do is getting young people up and working, right, specifically on job seeker benefits and stuff. That's probably not too much of a shock, because I think that's where he sits specifically. Whenever I've asked him about it, he always looks at the job seeker benefit in particular to say, hey, look, what we're trying to do is, if you're on the job seeker, don't just sit there, actually be active and all those different things. So nothing of that was too much of a surprise for you?
Oh no, I mean it's all sounds great.
Yeah.
I think the issue here though is how, in reality, how do these policies work? Yeah. So there are sanctions, there are ways that you can push people off the benefit, and so it comes down to a carrot and a stick. Do you offer people a stick to get them out of the benefit, or do you offer them a carrot? Now, Labour certainly weren't perfect in this area, but programs that I've seen that have worked in the past is things like the Green Jobs Initiative, where this is something National and Labour have done in the past, where they actually created contracts around tree planting, environmental work. There's huge amounts of labour that's needed to get our all the tree planting we need to do to meet our climate change requirements. Now, those are schemes that we're getting young people, because they're often you don't need a lot of qualifications, you can learn on the job. Those types of schemes are great ways to get people off the benefit and into work. You can start in those jobs when you're 16. I've visited a lot of those schemes as a journalist. They're really great. That is the sort of area we need investment. We need more schemes that are going to transition children or young people who are not fitting the mainstream schooling system, and get them into types of work that can actually really help them start off on a career into something that's going to benefit them. That's the sort of rhetoric we need around this issue. We can't just have a stick and say, well, if you don't turn up to work, we're going to kick you off the benefit, and you're basically going to have to then become homeless, probably turn to crime, and then become part of our prison system. So that is essentially what will happen, whether he realizes that or not. That is the reality, okay? And so we have plenty of community groups or gangs or people who will accept young people and get them out there dealing drugs, out on dirt bikes, driving around our communities, delivering, drugs to different people who want to purchase them. That is not an alternative that we need to be helping as a society. So it's fine with the rhetoric around getting people. We need people to get up and get into jobs. But what is the way to do that? Is it through giving them a kick up the backside, or is it offering better, stronger alternatives?
Yeah, so. No, you're bang on there, because there's a reality to it, right? It's nice to say that, and the idea of it is good, and obviously good intentions, but there's also a reality. And I guess when you're not cultured in that, in terms of understanding how that community works and all that stuff.
And I wouldn't say that this is something that either National or Labour have nailed in the past. But if you've worked in these communities,
you'd know about that.
And to be honest, as I have, you see that the reality of policy and the reality on the ground is often very different.
Yeah, that's a really good point this morning. Of course, you can watch that interview with the Prime Minister on our 5:30 on our Facebook page. Yesterday, Justin, we caught up with the Minister for Pacific Peoples, Dr. Shane Reti, and he couldn't tell us which Ministry for Pacific Peoples programs are going to be axed to meet the 7.5% cut that they need to achieve, but he did say they couldn't really talk about it in case there were any employment issues, suggesting that they might have to find some of it from staff cuts. Now, do you have a sense of the impact that the public service cuts are likely to have?
I have friends working in the public service, and there definitely are staff cuts coming, right across, not just within MPP, but right across the sector. It will have potential detrimental impacts for all communities, because whether you like it or not, public service or public servants do a lot of things that keep our society going. If you're applying for a passport, if you're applying for immigration services, if you're applying to get your house consented, all of that requires a public servant. These are things that they oil the functions of our society. Now, you can squeeze more and more blood out of a stone and let go of staff, but it slows down everything else. So again, it's going to be really interesting, the impacts of this. I mean, right-wing commentators like Matthew Houghton have talked about this a lot, how we've, over the last 24 years basically, we've been slimming down our public service, and it's actually slowed down the effectiveness of our government, of our civil society to actually do basic things like, roading consents, housing consents. It makes our economy move slower because there's less people able to do functions that we need. We have all these laws and regulations, but there's actually less people to enact those laws and regulations. So it's it often is another easy political line to say that we're going to cut the public service, but it will have an impact on the everyday way that we do life, and so it'll be interesting how that goes. And I think from talking to different people, it is creating a lot of stress within the public service, and it's but it's the cycle we're in, and and again I would say that maybe the way Labour had structured things opened this door in terms of it was they created an opportunity here for National, because some of the things they were focusing on weren't delivering.
That's right.
Yeah.
Was there anything that Dr. Ritchie said yesterday that was interesting to you?
Look, I think the measles outbreak is something that we should be really aware of. I mean, he's clearly across it. I don't think there was a lot of media around the $50 million that he's put into vaccination services, and it's one thing. There's a lot of criticism of him right now for bringing to an end the Māori Health Authority.
Yeah, there is.
And there's probably some really justified criticism,
Yeah.
but we've essentially gone from having a Māori Health Authority to now putting a Māori Health Minister who will now hold the power for a lot of these decisions. And that vaccination program is an example of him prioritising money to Māori health providers. So it's a lot of pressure on him to deliver for Māori as a Māori. He's clearly up for it, but it'll be interesting how he goes. And so I think he's definitely got his heart in the right place, it sounds like, from that interview. He wants to see vaccination rates get up for Pacific and Māori communities, which is a good thing, whether you pro-vaccine or not. We don't have the polio virus in New Zealand anymore thanks to vaccines. And so the measles outbreak, which is spreading across the world right now, 83 people died in Samoa in 2019 because of measles. We do need to address that, and it's good to see him putting measures in place to address that.
No, I agree with that. I think it's important, and especially in his role that he's in. Now, from your perspective, what's the major political issues this week as the government counts down its 100-day action plan, which I understand ends on the 8th of March?
Yeah, so that's coming up. I think one of the really interesting things was so Chris Bishop has been rolled out to talk about his plans around housing, and he made the really interesting comments that he would like to see housing costs, so the price of a house, to only be between 3 and 5 times your income. Now that's the closest a politician has ever come to saying that they want to see house prices come down. Because often that sets off the housing lobby groups who are saying, how dare you want to bring house prices down? My income is attached to this house price market going up forever and ever and ever. But at least he's made a very tentative call that he'd like to see house prices stabilise. Hopefully his investor property market friends don't give him a hard time about that, because he's right. If you're earning, say, if you're a household earning 100K and you want to buy a house, it shouldn't be $1 million. It should be between 300 and 500,000 for you and your partner.
That would be nice.
And that's actually normal across the world. We think we're the norm, but we're actually well outside the norm when you look at other Western countries. And so if he can deliver on that within the next 5 to 10 years, that's huge. It'll have huge impacts on so many aspects of our society. And so they're doing a number of things as part of their 100-day plan, making it easier to get consents, trying to make it easier to build smaller houses. They're going to change laws so that people from overseas can build houses in New Zealand, which, some risks around that, I guess, in terms of losing land to foreign investors. But look, those is maybe the changes that are needed. If we want to get more affordable housing, some of the changes they're suggesting possibly are good ones.
Yeah, look, you talked about it at the beginning, because this is when all the people come and complain and not feel good and all those stuff, specifically people who didn't vote and all those different things, right? And you're talking about, if this is not something that you like, if you want to have the voice or the right to really have a voice, that's the importance of going out and doing those voting, right? And we'll sit here day after day after day, specifically aiming towards our Pacific community to be like, get up there, get that vote in, because if not, and you're not enjoying this, whatever this looks like in terms of our government, this is just our reality, right? So
yeah, I mean, 100%. We have to get engaged. I feel like we say this so much, but if we want to see policies that reflect our communities and reflect the changes we want, if we want housing that fits our cultural values, our community's values, then we need to, get people in power who will do those things. I think it's a good time to reflect. Efessor Collins passed away last week, I believe. Yes, it feels like it's been longer, but it was only last week. And this was something. If anything that we can, reflect on his life, it was someone who put his name up for public office and spent every, and I know this personally, that he spent every waking day and hour thinking, how can I advance the cause of Pacific communities? And that was through political office, through working in local board, through council, and then finally in Parliament. And we, as a, if we take one thing from his life, it's that we too can create change by getting engaged in the political process. It's not enough just to sit back and complain and say, oh, we've lost a person who could have helped us. We can all make the same changes and same difference that he did. He's set the example in many ways for us. He's challenged both leaders within his own political parties and those on the other side. He was never afraid to, and it hurt him politically, but he was never afraid to speak the truth. And that's something we can all learn from. Let's challenge our leaders. Let's ask for better. Let's push harder. He was only on our radio station 2 days before he passed talking about this very thing.
Crazy.
Talking about how words are not enough. It has to be actions as well. We can apologise for the dawn raids, but what do you do next? What do you do next when, after you've said sorry for different things that you've done? You've got to then follow it up with action. And that's something we can all do, whether it's, taking part in council consultations, whether it's, maybe joining a local high school board, maybe it's, turning up to a community meeting about safety in your area. These are all things that we can get engaged with. Efessor gave us an example of how to do that. If you start local, you end up going global,
Love it. Awesome way to end off this conversation. Awesome telling all this morning, and appreciate that too, bringing up the man himself, Efessor Collins, this morning. Appreciate you for jumping onto the show, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bulavanaka, Levi, and enjoy the view and the rest of your show.
I shall, my friend. Appreciate you, man. Hey, look, it is 9 minutes to 8 o'clock this morning. If you do want to see that full interview, you can go to our 5